For those of you who weren't here earlier this morning, my name's Tom with Unlucky Frog Gaming. I'm going to be your host for today's panel. Today we have got Walk the Onyx Path, and we're joined by some esteemed guests, which I'm going to allow to introduce themselves momentarily. Basically the format of today's panel, we're going to open up with some questions, and then we're going to throw out to you if you've got questions that you wish to ask as well of our panelists. So I'm going to give our panelists an opportunity now to introduce themselves and tell us a bit about themselves and some of the things that they've done. And I'm going to start with the person to my left, which is you, Matthew. So would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Hello, my name is Matthew Dawkins. I am the creative strategist at Onyx Path Publishing, which basically means I oversee a bunch of game lines and people, including the They Came From series, the Scion series, the World of Darkness series of games, and I dabble in various others. I freelance for Onyx Path, among other companies, and yeah, I've been role-playing now since, well, longer than I care to imagine.
Thank you very much. And next?
My name's John Burke. I'm the token Scotsman at Onyx Path, and I've been working mainly on They Came From and vampire games, but I've also done Werewolf the Forsaken and a lot of Dark Era stuff. Generally write, but I have developed a vampire book for Onyx Path too. Called Forbidden Religions, which you should buy because I will make no money.
Thank you. And next?
Hello, I'm Michele, and as I often say, I'm the Italian one. I worked on the Chronicles of Darkness from Mummy the Curse 2nd edition. I wrote for Werewolf the Apocalypse on the Apocalyptic Records, and I also became an acquisition for the They Came From line. I wrote several supplements for that, and I pitched and co-developed They Came From the Cyclops Escape, which is based on fantasy movies and such. I also wrote for Scion, Trinity Continuum, and basically anything Onyx Path allows me to do.
Prolific.
And last but not least.
All right, I'm Kim Godwin. I'm an American. Please don't hold it against me. I'm just the newest of the freelancers up here. I worked on They Came From Classified, They Came From Cyclops' Cave. I worked on Forgotten Ones and Forbidden Orders for the Mage 20 and unfortunately the Lore of the Traditions Kickstarter. I'm also working on Trinity Continuum Aberrant. I'm on 3 books for that. I worked on Aether. I'm working on Aegis and a couple of other ones that we haven't quite got to yet.
Yeah.
Aegis we can talk about it.
Talk about it.
We deal with a lot of games at Onyx Path. That's, sometimes we give more games more focus than others, depending on what we're pushing and what our focus tends to be. All 3 of my colleagues here have been excellent writers and collaborators, not in a quizzling sense. And probably didn't need to mention that now. God, that's awkward.
Cut the mic.
You made it awkward. Collaborator.
Yes, we're not to mention the war. It's always a great joy to come to Tabletop Scotland. This isn't our first time, not my first time anyway. And yeah, we do enjoy hearing what the customers, what the fans, our role players think of the games we work on. So when it comes to Q&A, do feel free to ask anything about any of our books. If we can, we will do our best to answer.
Thank you very much. That's great. Okay, so start with the obvious, perhaps. So Onyx Path's recently celebrated 10 years as a company, I believe.
Yeah.
You've published things such as Scarred Lands, Scion, Exalted, the They Came From series that you mentioned. So what's kind of next on the horizon for you guys?
Well, so the next big crowdfunding campaigns we've got planned are for Scion God, which is the, as the name implies, it is the godly edition of Scion, which goes from origin to hero to demigod to god. So now you're actually going to be playing gods. And that it is not a small project. I think anyone with any role-playing experience knows when you get to high levels of power in games, things tend to break down. Mostly because you either level enemies with the protagonists and therefore you don't feel special, or you don't and the protagonists feel so overwhelmingly powerful there's no challenge. God is a rare case where we've spent quite a lot of time really making it elegant, I think is the best word for it, where the game allows you to play gods, allows you to feel like gods, change the world around you, shepherd followings, build a pantheon, topple the gods who you might be replacing. So if you're, for instance, a member of the Theoi, Zeus is the head of the pantheon, well, maybe you want to be the god of thunder, storms, and creation now. So time to have a fight with Zeus, which can be as simple as duking it out on a cloud or on a high street, or sending masses of followers in armies against each other.
Sounds awesome.
Covers a lot of tiers of play. We've also got another crowdfunding campaign coming up for one of the Exalted books, Exalted 3rd edition, which I'm by no means an expert on, but some of my colleagues might be able
I
to speak
think
to.
that the next one is going to be Sidereals.
Yes, I believe you are correct. Because Exalted just keeps growing and its fan base is very, well, fanatical. They love the game, and I can't fault them for that, so we keep putting games out because they enjoy them.
Because we
But-
just finished the Exigence Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before
Not so
we
long
did
ago.
Aether, yeah.
And yeah, meanwhile, we keep expanding the They Came From line, the Trinity Continuum line, and
I cheer for what?
we have an awful lot of 20th anniversary products, despite the fact the 20th anniversary editions came out up to 10 years ago, maybe longer, for Werewolf and Mage. So yeah, there's a lot going on. We keep busy.
Excellent. Sounds awesome. I play quite a few of those games myself, so I'm looking forward to seeing what comes with those. Okay, so next question. We've seen quite a few of the They Came From series, and obviously you mentioned quite a few of them in your introductions. We've had From the Sea, The Grave, Classified, the Cyclops Cave. Is there plans for more in that line, and can you give anything away about what that might be?
Yeah.
John, talk about Danger Zone.
They Came From the Danger Zone.
Okay.
Yes.
Our favourite. Is effectively They Came From based on my favourite films, which are the cheesiest of action movies starring the likes of Arnold Schwarzenegger and Jean-Claude Van Damme and those sorts of things. And it is a cavalcade of cheesy action which makes no sense whatsoever, but is hilarious to perform. And it covers everything from your kind of more sort of romantic, dramatic kind of Michael Douglas kind of stuff, as I say, all the way through to the Running Man and the sort of total brain dead, kill
Nonsense.
everyone in the room nonsense that you could possibly encounter. And like all They Came From games will remain always the most fun you'll have sitting at a table playing a role-playing game.
Yeah.
'Cause it's just designed to be fun.
I think they're going to veer into sort of the Austin Powers territory potentially as well.
Yeah, we do a fair amount of Austin Powers pastiche and Classified,
Yeah.
but it certainly appears in Danger Zone as well. Do you remember the 5 archetypes in Danger Zone? Let's test the panelists. Who remembers the playable archetypes
We
in
had
Danger
a
Zone?
clone, cyborg, combat specialist, and I forget what the other ones are.
Martial artists one?
Yes,
the
Combat
company-
Master, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Combat
The
master.
Commando?
The
Commando,
Commando.
yeah. And Cop. The humble cop.
I'm a cop, you idiot!
Get to the chopper!
It's just an excuse to write a game with lots of Schwarzenegger quotes.
Pretty much. Yeah.
We followed a pattern for the archetype naming this time.
Yes, they
Then John Carpenter and Stallone, also Van Damme also inserted themselves.
Yes. The most popular part of the They Came From game seems to be, from my vantage as the sort of overall developer, the usage of quips, one-liners as game mechanics. And really, from a cinematic basis, that originated with Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
So the fact that we've followed this path from 1950s B-movies with Beneath the Sea, all the way through Hammer Horror in Beyond the Grave, and Classified with espionage, Cyclops' Cave with fantasy and sword and sorcery. Now we're at action movies, and it's kind of like returning home.
Yeah.
It was a very easy book. I think all of us wrote on it.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was a very easy book to write because it's just silly and fun.
Look forward to seeing that. It looks like you're all quite passionate about it, so it should be a good one. Okay, cool. So what about the Chronicles of Darkness line? Are there any plans in that vein along the vampire, werewolf, mage, etc.?
Do you want to talk about Chronicles of Darkness, Michele?
The upcoming books for the Chronicles of Darkness, we have just released for the backers, so it's coming soon for the rest of everyone. The rather big expansion for Changeling the Lost second edition, we released Kith and Kin, which is loads of player option with some favorites from first edition, like the Draconic option making a return and plenty more. So that's was a really good book to receive as a backer there. And we also released another Kickstarter goal for Mummy the Curse, so that will also come very soon, which is the Book of Lasting Death, which is more a different kind of mummies, more powers and more options. These are the humble way to put it is the companions for the course, but I often find that those tend to be the best supplements for each line. These sort of player's guide always deliver across the years. And I think the Tome of the Pentacle for Mage the Awakening second edition is coming rather soon.
Mage the Awakening fans are similar to Exalted fans in their hunger for books. And
Which is fitting.
I don't blame them. I mean, it's the hubris of being a mage, I guess. That just makes them want more and more power. But Tome of the Pentacle is a book that's been in development for a while, too long, and we are now moving forward with it. And it's so part of the reason it's taken a while is because, quite frankly, Mage is a very difficult game to write. It is. It's a hard game to write. It's a hard game to develop. It contains a lot of detail that is, by any definition, arcane, unless you're a fan of Mage. And that's not me trying to put off the casual role player, because there's plenty in Mage to enjoy. But that meant Tome of the Pentacle was under the stewardship of developers and writers who were really passionate about the game line, wanted to get it right. They were given the time to do so. We're now getting the art in for it. So yeah, Tome of the Pentacles coming out for Mage. We've got more Changeling the Lost coming out too, in the form of the Hedge, which allows you to visit Arcadia and the lovely realms of the True Fae, because they're such nice people. And
I think there's also the Clade Companion for Deviant.
Yes, Deviant's got more coming out. I think Hunter the Vigil may have more coming out for it as well. So there is Chronicles of Darkness releases on the schedule. A few people have asked, when are we going to see more core books for the Chronicles of Darkness? And right now the focus is to basically deliver what we've already promised for the existing lines. Ultimately, the Chronicles of Darkness, much like the World of Darkness, is a licensed product. We license it from Paradox Interactive, who have been very generous with allowing us to create everything we've been able to create so far. But it is also down to them to how many more books we can create. Okay. So we can pitch things, and we may think we've got the best ideas in the world, but unless they approve them, we can only work on the things we've already got scheduled.
So that kind of ties into my next question, and perhaps one you'll be able to answer quite quickly, I imagine. But so obviously the older World of Darkness books, so things like Masquerade, they're now with Renegade, and rather than yourselves. Are they product lines that you're looking potentially to work with in the future, or do anything with in the future? Or are they left outside now, or is that waiting to see if you maybe get some permissions down the road?
Oh yeah, well for 5th edition, right now Renegade are, I guess, what you'd consider the primary licensee, in that if Paradox wants source books made and they're not making them themselves, they'll ask Renegade to do it. And right now they are tightly controlling what goes into Vampire books, and presumably Hunter the Reckoning books as well. And so they're only wanting to deal with one company. And we've had a very good run with it. We can't complain about we've released something like 6-7 V5 books. We released a lot of V20 books. Yeah. So yeah, from a business standpoint, if we suddenly got an offer to release a new big V5 book or a Werewolf 5th edition book or something like that, I'm pretty damn certain we'd take it seriously because they make a decent amount of money in an industry that doesn't tend to make a massive amount of money. Yeah. But it's something, again, we can pitch for and sort of throw a line out for. But I think it's fair to say World of Darkness right now isn't out in our sort of, I guess, forward direction. What we're really hammering on is Trinity Scion They Came From, to a lesser extent, Scarred Lands, and Pugmire as well. I'd put in there. Pugmire, Monarchies of Mao, they're very popular for us. But yeah, World of Darkness, and seeing that Renegade are very happily shepherding that line, it wouldn't make too much sense for us to suddenly start, pulling books from them, unless we were asked to, paid to.
So we touched on obviously a few of the lines there. What other cool stuff are you working on, either within the Onyx Path or even without it, if you've got other works going on at the moment?
Kim, you can talk about the world below. No, we haven't spoken at all about the world below at a convention yet.
Yes. So the world below is a post-apocalyptic setting. So the world above, something horrible has happened. We don't know what exactly has happened because going up there equals death. People go up and they die. So in the world beneath, the deeper you go, the cleaner the water, the cleaner the air, the better the resources. But by being below, the strata in which you exist has changed you and morphed you from what was before to after. So the concepts of time are different now because you don't have a day and night cycle. You either wander in the darkness or you survive by the glow of sunflies or the illumination of fungi or whatever's beneath, unless you've been mutated by the chaos, which is the magic of what's beneath, and twisted in ways that you can now exist in the darkness without a torch or something like that. So there's a lot of cool stuff. So I like to think of it as like a body horror type of game, but it's a survival game. It's a horror. It's community building. There's a lot of different things because the people that live in the below weren't the things that existed there from the beginning. There was things that already lived there, and the people from above have now moved in. So you're dealing with a little bit of colonization because it's like if you have to work together to survive, do you trust these outsiders? Do you work with them? Do you displace them? And if you displace them, what happens? Or what happens when you come across the ruins of a civilization? What other things are lurking down there? Because things are living down there and breathing and breeding. So it's like, so now you got to deal with whatever creatures are living down there and being mutated from whatever is leaking from above. So there's lots of cool things. We have magic, we have combat, we have a lot of cool body horror stuff.
Lots of giant bugs all over
Lots of giant bugs.
Yeah. It's there's Shades of Hollow Knight, if you're familiar with the video game, to it, in the subterranean setting. I can certainly speak for two of us on the panel when I say we are huge fans of Hollow Knight. And there's a certain sort of J.G. Ballard class struggle, dystopian side to it, where the closer you are to the surface, the more room you have, but the worse the resources you have. The lower down you get, the better the resources, but of course you're going to hoard the resource, and the weirder things are. And in terms of inspiration, we're very excited about the World Below because it's a brand new game line using a StoryPath system, using StoryPath Ultra, which is going to be basically be like a StoryPath 1.5, I suppose. Streamlined, where it's not purely fantasy, though there will definitely be enough to satisfy D&D players and Pathfinder players. But there's Pendragon styles in it, and A Song of Ice and Fire, because you are building communities, generational hierarchies and things like that, working around the world around you. There is exploration to it, because you're carving out new tunnels, trying to find a new clean source of water, or somewhere that's not inhabited with carnivorous shadows, things like that. And there's exalted elements to it as well, because the powers you develop as you adapt to your environment can be pretty explosive, dynamic, and, well, hopefully exciting to use from the very first level. It's one of my big bugbears, not the monster, in role-playing is that first level you feel weak and like your moves have little impact. Everyone picks Magic Missile, but no one expects Magic Missile to look good. Mm-hmm. And so in this game, it was very much our intention to make characters feel important and heroic from the very start. So yeah, there's lots of sources, but The World Below is something. It's not coming out this year because it's only just got through its first draft phase. But we are very much looking forward to seeing how that's received because we've not explored a brand new fantasy game in a very long time.
So is that a world of itself that's going to be kind of set in? Is that its own kind of IP and everything? For now, okay.
There may be references. I mean, it's an Onyx Path property. It was a Matthew Dawkins concept, but it's an Onyx Path property. And that means, in theory, we can pull elements from Scarred Lands and from Scion and Trinity, and they came from if we really want to. Okay. A lot of that kind of thing can be Easter eggs, teasers, but some of it may actually be connective tissue.
Okay.
Seeing how well a game lands, especially a brand new IP, very much dictates what we do to expand it.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Anything else that you can hint at for now, or?
Well, we have at least 3 new Aberrant supplements coming out, which will be updating bringing some of the stuff forward from first edition. So, Hated and Feared, which is the Terragen book, but also covering some of the Nova cults and anti-Nova hate groups. And then, of course, we have From Shadows, which is kind of the directive book. So dealing with baseline humans and maybe some talents dealing with providing oversight of these Nova organizations and Nova-related threats. And then Best at What I Do, which is the elite book, but it also covers some of the other independent Novas that are making their way through society. And then, of course, we just kickstarted Trinity Continuum Aether, which is our 1895 Trinity book. So steampunk with War of the Worlds Martians. And then we have Aegis that's coming up, which is Greek Dark Ages. So 1100, 700 BC type of stuff. And that's still, we just got through, we just submitted final drafts for that. So we should be seeing that sometime in the next year or so-ish.
I think so.
Maybe, depending on how kind publishing is.
So yeah, fantastic. Working on a lot.
Yeah, that's awesome. Keep you busy. Okay, so that's the end of the pre-prepared questions. I'm going to throw to the audience in a minute. But before I do have a question myself, because I can do that. So
you're abusing your power.
I am, a little bit. And funnily enough, it is about power. So one thing you mentioned there is, obviously, you deal with some of your games, Exalted, Scion, even Mage to a degree, you're dealing with very high-powered characters, very high-powered individuals. How do you balance that degree of power and giving the player the potential to feel like, they are these gods, they are these incredibly powerful characters, but still have encounters that are relevant and, that there's something to actually challenge them?
Can you answer that from a vampire perspective, John?
I sure can, because I was just thinking about that. I think, in essence, what you're talking about in terms of balance has to be looked at in the context of what game you're discussing. So vampire in particular immediately came to mind. Yes, you're a really powerful vampire and all that, but the balance against that is the further you go down that power track, if you want, the more powerful you want to become, the more of yourself you have to give away in order to achieve that. Yeah. And I mean, certainly you can have a game if you want where it's just like we are superpowered humans that run about and fight crime. Yeah. And that's fine. The system can allow that. But if that's not what your table wants, then to me anyway, when the games that are on, the balance is always found in, yeah, you can do that, but, which is you can be the powerful thing, you can have these powers, but in a way, the essence of that game is how you are handling yourself, and part of that is not acting like a god and not believing you're a god and remembering that you were once something else. Yeah. That's my poetic answer.
Okay, I like that. Good. Cool. And I've indulged myself a bit. I'll throw to the audience at that point. So, any questions from the audience? We do have a mic that'll be thrown around.
Hopefully working. Yeah, it's working.
Cool.
Yeah.
So if you
don't throw the mic.
You can pop your hand up if you've got a question, and we'll bring the mic over to you.
And if no one has an RPG-related question, we'll answer anything. Really, not necessarily in an informed
the number
fashion.
Of your credit card.
Give it a good college try.
Thank you. I'm Andrew from Geek Native. Onyx Path, I think, has always had a very symbiotic relationship with Drive-Thru.
Yeah.
And I was wondering whether you had any thoughts on their recent Don't Call It a Merger announcement with Roll20 and in fact so the evolution of the digital side of the hobby.
Well, it's something we're pushing more toward. We are right now, for instance, Kim is working on a virtual tabletop, not exclusive but very much geared scenario for Assassins for Trinity Continuum. There's another one going on for They Came from Camp Murder Lake. You're right, we have a very good relationship with Drive-Thru. I can't cite chapter and verse on sales numbers, but I would hazard a guess that we sell a great deal of our material, if not through crowdfunding, through Drive-Thru. So it stands to reason that we will also create products that take advantage of a service that's linked to Roll20. Therefore, a scenario should come with maps, counters, whatever else is needed to make those things work together. Now, obviously, we're not the only big seller on Drive-Thru RPG, so there's going to be a lot of companies doing the same thing, and I'm sure Drive-Thru won't give us all their attention, although it would be nice if they did. So, I mean, you're right. We want to see how their relationship develops, because we don't have all of that information yet. The Drive-Thru are predictably keeping it quite close to their chest, because I think they're still working through an awful lot of those details. But if it becomes apparent that it would be beneficial to us, and I suspect it will be, to make games that don't just release through Drive-Thru but are automatically available through Roll20 with the assets I described and perhaps other features too. I mean, I can already imagine They Came from being translated through to, and immediately you've got quick cards, cinematic cards and so forth on a virtual tabletop. It sounds like a very good thing to me. So hopefully we can take advantage of that.
Fantastic. Okay for you? Cool. Thank you very much. Any other questions? I'm going to make Josh run around today. It's going to be great. Get that Fitbit on. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi guys, I'm James. Fan of Mage 20.
Yep.
Which is still got things coming.
It does.
Gradually, slowly.
Well, I mean, the little-known fact of World of Darkness is that Mage is the second biggest seller of World of Darkness. Most people assume that because of the order of release, it's always Werewolf, but it's Vampire, Mage, then Werewolf. So, because we can't make Vampire 20 books anymore, because there's a new edition. But there isn't a new edition of Mage. So
that's the question. Is there much more in the pipeline? And secondly to that, is there plans for a capstone like Beckett's Jihad and the Apocalypse Tales when that finally?
That's a very good question.
Because I thought that was kind of what Lore of the Traditions was supposed to kind of wrap up, which is still going through the process, because we finished the Kickstarter, and then we had the craft book, which is the Forgotten Ones and Forbidden Orders, and we finished the final drafts of that, so we're just waiting for art and then editing and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's off the table to do some kind of Ascension-based Beckett's Jihad Diary apocalyptic record that's separate to Lore of the Traditions, in the sense of, lots of artifacts, lots of in-character accounts. I probably wouldn't want to develop it myself, because the meta plot for Mage is way above my head.
Depends which reality you're dealing with.
Exactly.
Yeah, small stuff.
I'd be extremely interested in that.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
But, as I say, it's a good question. Because there's no Mage 5th edition on the horizon immediately, it's not like we've been given a hard stop by Paradox, which is why you see new products occasionally being announced. Sorcerer recently came out for Mage 20 and has done very well as well. And I think right now it's still only PDF only. I don't think we've done the print-on-demand version yet. So
they just finished the errata for it, so that should be
so through. When we consider
there's a Victorian Mage not far.
Yep.
It's happening.
Yeah, we've got Victorian Mage. We've got more stretch goals for Victorian Mage. I think 3 of them. Lord of the Traditions, as you say, we've got 2 stretch goals for that. So, yeah, that's nearly 10 further M20 books to come. If they keep selling well, I mean, I can't speak for Paradox, but I would say it would be in their best interest, if you're listening, Paradox, it would be in their best interest to invite us to make more books or approve more books for Mage, because, I mean, it makes good sense. Plus, Mage the Ascension fans, much like Mage the Awakening fans, are fanatical on the side of fandom. Not in a bad way necessarily, but in the way that they love expanding their game. They love to see more books for it. It's interesting. We work with a lot of games, and there are some games that people will play and they'll think, the core book and the companion, that's all I'll ever really need. World of Darkness, especially Mage, is a book that as a game that the fans of it just never seem to stop wanting more. And that's good news for us because we like creating them.
Yeah, I think the success of Technocracy Reloaded and then Victorian Mage, then Lore of the Tradition, all the crowdfunding campaign we made, the success speaks for itself about how passionate the fans are.
Yeah.
Or with Mage the podcast, they were interviewing us, talking about how to use other line books to supplement Mage games as new concepts, new ideas. Like, I had a really good interview with Terry Robinson of Mage the podcast, talking about using Aether as a way to branch off into different concepts for Mage play.
Yeah.
I consider Trinity Continuum Eater and Victorian Mage basically unofficial companion books, to be honest. Because
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, they both approach the subject matter of magic in a Victorian era in a very different way, but that's good. They complement each other. So yes, I hope so would be the short answer, but I don't do short answers.
It's okay, we've got an hour to fill, so
That's all right.
feel free to indulge. Have we got another question? Yes.
Talking about magic, how can you explain a wee bit more about the chaos in the world beneath? Did you say it was called?
The world below.
The world below. Sorry.
So I can't confirm too much because it is still being written, but the concept is essentially, if the world is riddled with all these tunnels, caves, and catacombs and the like, and the lower down you go, the weirder things get. At the base of all of that, deeper than anyone can reasonably dig, except for some people, maybe the original people that descended, is this well, for want of a better word, from which this chaos emerges. Now, chaos is all over the place. It's dotted in rocks, in portals and things like that, but it's the source of it all down there. And one could imagine through a D&D prism, I guess, that this is a portal to another plane. It's pretty much the plane of elemental chaos, if you like. And the people who are surrounding it are taking it, using it to live forever, give themselves power, godly, and so on. And because we like to put subtext into games, not always subtle, maybe if they shared all this power, of course, everyone in the world below would live in a beautiful underground utopia and we could all live in perfect harmony. But it turns out that when you have access to the very source of magic, you protect it and guard it and feel disinclined to share. So it brings up myself, I've always historically been very interested in revolutions. And I've always liked the idea of, as a thought process of, let's say your adventuring party goes all the way down to the bottom of the world below and seizes the power, seizes the tools from the people who are guarding the well and taking all the power from it. Do you then keep it? Do you then try distributing it? And in your attempt to distribute it, do you try and do so evenly? Because you know that as you are ascending again, people are going to want to take it from you. Or do you think, I would be a more responsible custodian of this power? These things get explored in fiction all the time. There's a movie on Netflix called The Platform, which is a Spanish sort of dystopian movie that explores a range of different, I guess, political and philosophical ideals about a platform, and the lower down it goes, basically the worse people get. And there's some similarities there, because no matter what you attempt to apply as a way of controlling or distributing the power, there'll be some people around to abuse it. And so right now, the people who control the magic could be said to be abusing it. They may even be people who try to wrest it from the originators. But what you do with it, if you access it, it's called chaos for a reason. It's very unpredictable. It's like wild magic in old D&D. You don't just use it and say, now I have perfect control over a fireball. No, you have a perfect ability to incinerate everyone around you. Not necessarily a good thing, but might be in a pinch.
It's very unstable.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's like I want to read one of our samples, but I don't think you'll let me.
No, I can't unfortunately read out any parts of the manuscript yet because I need to redline them as the developer.
And we need to receive those red lines.
Yes, but as a concept, that's the idea behind it.
Is that instability with the magic? Is that something that's actually going to be part of the system as well that players
Yep.
are going to have
Yep.
to contend
It
with?
is.
Cool. That's really cool.
Yeah, everyone loves magic that flows up in your
Yeah,
face.
that's going to be popular.
I mean, I was mentioning lots of sources, lots of origins for the world below, and because I've worked across a lot of games now, all of us have, everyone at Onyx Path has. We work with a lot of freelancers. It's difficult to not draw inspiration, if we want to say that instead of rip off ideas, from lots of different sources. And we love Mage, as mentioned. Mage famously has Paradox, not the company. and
Paradox.
it's sometimes a frustrating mechanic. The idea of if I'm vulgar with my magic, it will blow up in my face. But at the same time, it's a wonderful tempering mechanic. And it gets back to your point about how do you balance out high power play? Well, let there be a backlash.
Yeah.
To being able to do absolutely everything. It doesn't always have to be your health goes down. But it can be something more esoteric or more personal.
Yeah.
Similar in the world below.
I love that.
I think there's an element of risk to it all, and the harder you push, you can get miracles done because chaos is, as the name implies, a nexus of possibilities you can exploit. But the harder you push, the bigger the risk. So, with consequences.
It was very much about figuring out a way to create powers to make people feel powerful, but still have enough of those consequences. But of course, the more control you gain over, more powerful you get, the more control you have, the less side effects there are. But you have to get to that point. You have to not blow up. I don't think that I don't know if that's actually one of the things we had, but I know I've had Mage games where there's been paradox backlash and an NPC has exploded. So I guess that's very possible in World Below as well.
I like how that plays into it. I mean, I've not had sight of these drafts, so I'm the one person up here that probably has no idea about this, but just from what I'm listening about, in terms of the chaos, it sounds like it plays heavily into the central sort of philosophical complex of the game, which is you could have these people that are all powerful, but you're standing there with ultimate power saying, I could set the world to rights, but I actually don't know what would happen. I could try and do that and end up making things worse. So in a sense, you're all powerful and powerless at the same time.
Yeah, we're not trying to preach or anything with this book. I as a developer, I prefer messages in games and fiction in general to be more subtle and to be found if the player or reader or viewer wants to find them. So we're not going to say using this is bad.
No.
There's no point offering people a tool and then saying, but we're going to punish you for using it. But going back to what Kim said right near the start about it's a game of colonization or colonialization, it is, with a twist that rarely gets explored in games, in that you are an exodus, you are refugees from a cataclysm of some kind, which is somewhat defined.
Yeah.
So you are forced to survive, you have to descend. Now, that doesn't mean you're necessarily going to get on with the people you're displacing.
Yeah.
And some of them may welcome you with open arms and say, yes, of course, you are undergoing a catastrophe right now, we'll help you. But how long does that charity extend? At what point do you start taking power from them? They don't think of this as chaos, necessarily. They've known it all their lives.
Yep.
You are the intruders, but you don't really have much of an option. How you conduct yourself is a choice.
Yeah, we also left the option open to basically play people from the various side, the various factions, including those who lived below before the cataclysm above happened. So we'll offer the tool to explore the drama and all the problems on the narratives that can happen in this from all sides, basically. And it's also really interesting because we include the generational aspect you mentioned, sort of inspired from Pendragon. That so you can see in a way what this generation does, what this round of player characters do, and how their action will impact the future. And so you can have a generation last for 20 sessions or 1 year, and you can have one work just for some months. So you can explore how the world below changes with you.
There's also some biology stuff involved.
Oh.
Why I keep leaning on into the body horror, but it doesn't. There's just different ways to go about it, but it's not like the driving force. There isn't like you pick this one biological thing, and you have like a universal thing over anybody else. It's just like, well, if you are this one biome, it's just one part of the character concept. It's just what you are, what you can do physically. It's not just making you better or worse than anyone else. And a lot of times, what happens is really kind of creepy, and which is fun for me to write. But it's just like really cool stuff that it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense why you would be able to do that. It's kind of weird, kind of gross, and it's unsettling. And now there's a negative side effect of doing this thing.
I got to write so many cool monsters and tap into body horror, cosmic horror, and all sorts of other things.
So is it as you're kind of descending as part of the narrative, and you're getting close to this source of chaos, is that almost, I don't want to say leveling up, but is that kind of...
Oh, you can choose how you live. If you want to descend, you can. If you want to stay in Mudtown near the surface, where the stratum around you is clay and everyone drinks rancid water leaking from the surface, you go right ahead. It's
doesn't sound like much of a choice.
No, but at least you're not subject to chaotic magic. You know what your suffering is at that point. It's, I would say, like a video game, I guess. The lower down you go, the harder you have to be in order to survive.
Yep.
So it has, in a sense, that sort of Dark Souls-esque. There are barriers that you can hurdle if you want, but you may not be ready to face what's on the other side. So they're like, I think I may have mentioned the outline or in the meetings, there's something I like in a lot of JRPGs, the open world ones, like Octopath, one of the recent ones, where you can basically choose to delve into parts of the world that you're not ready to fit into yet or ready to beat. But that doesn't mean you can't do it and get some high-level treasure if you can just measure how much damage you can take. If you make a good estimate and you say, okay, I'm spending 5 minutes on that side of the map, I won't survive longer than 5 minutes, but you can reap great rewards for doing so. Okay. It's, a similar mentality to that, I would say.
Okay, that's really cool. So any other questions? Yes?
I'm liking that all the questions are coming from the middle aisle, by the way. This is making my job very easy.
Everyone on the outside feels they can't.
If anyone wants Josh to sort of clamber over some chairs, that would be fine too.
So continuing on with the world below, actually, I have a question about player characters. So are there going to be sort of dramatically different types of player characters? Are there going to be magic users and non-magic users, or is every player character going to have access to this chaos magic? Is there a particular thing that sets player characters apart from your typical average Joe NPC? Because I'm guessing not everybody in this world has access to exalted level powers.
No, everyone has access to exalted level powers in different avenues, I guess. So just like in exalted, everyone can use chaos, at least as currently written. I will interrupt to say that any of this is subject to change. It's unlikely it's going to change drastically because it's been fairly tightly developed to this point. But the idea is anyone can tap into chaos, it's just the risks are greater if you're not pursuing what is effectively a class focused on it. But that does mean, at a pinch, if you need to throw a thermal detonator to get out of the room and you've got no other option, you've got the capacity to do it, it's just likely it will go off in your hand rather than after you've thrown it. But in terms of your playable options, much like other story path games, we will be playing with the path system. So we have paths in mind that are related to your biology, which is also your geology, your profession, effectively, and what was the other one? Culture. Yes, because one of the things that I'm sure everyone in this room is aware of is a lot of fantasy games are moving away from the idea of race or species as a defining feature, and certainly we wanted to. We want you to still be able to play dwarfs and elves in this game if you want, but you're not defined by the biology of being an elf. Now, you may be defined, if you choose, to be defined by the culture of an elf, if you want elves in your part of the world below to have an exclusive, traditional, stereotypical, xenophobic, paranoid elven culture. You could do that if you want, and there will be tools to allow you to do various things like that. But essentially, each character, I describe it as each character starts off multi-classed. You all start with one level in 3 things. And then you choose which ones you meter up. You could do it in a balanced way. You could hyper-focus on your chaos and just become some bizarre lich archmage if you want, which I'm sure everyone will do because that's magic users for you. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of options, but there will be definition to them because on the flip side of that is when you have lots of options, choice paralysis can dilute everything and make everything just lose all, I guess, flavour and appeal. So I know it's a rather rambly answer, but I hope that answers some of what you're looking for.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Any other questions? Yes.
You might think I've been cheeky having 2 questions, but I'm like sitting on 20. But just to follow up for that comment about races and the fantasy trends, I was thinking that the reaction to 1 D&D has been mixed. I was wondering whether the panel sort of had any sort of personal sort of sort of agreement with any of those reactions, or whether there's anything that Onyx Path could learn or insights from the evolution of 1D&D and the community reaction.
Well, first I'll speak for Onyx Path, and then I'll let the panelists speak for themselves. So Onyx Path, we always pay attention to trends. You have to, really. It would be suicide in the industry not to. So we want to see how things shake out. It would be inappropriate for us to take a company stance, I would think, especially as things are still being worked on, and it's a playtest document for another thing. None of this is resolved, and one would hope that where there has been backlash, significant backlash, Wizards of the Coast will take advice from that. But it's always an interesting thing when something comes out. I mean, we saw it with V5, and I was on that from the beginning, that sometimes there'll be massive backlash to an idea, and then when it settles down, people realise, actually, this works. So how that comes into being with 1D&D, we often see people catch on the train of panic or reaction, and then cooler heads prevail, if you want to put it like that, or we actually get to chat about it and realise, okay, maybe we'll tweak it, but it's not something we should all utterly throw out. So as Onyx Path, yes, you're completely right. There is something we can learn from this, and we will be learning. We watch when Monty Cook releases games, when Wizards of the Coast release games, when Paizo releases games, when anyone releases games, because we, of course, want to get it right. We're all on social media, so we can't really avoid it. It's where I envy some role-playing game companies that have absolutely zero social media presence. On some level, I don't know how they do it. How do they find customers? But on the other, God, what peaceful quiet it must be to work for freely, quietly, and just develop a game without any fan reaction.
Not dreading your phone vibrating in the middle of the night and what it may bring.
What new scandal has broken out? But I pass it to the panel for anyone who's aware of what's going on with 1D&D to give your personal thoughts.
We take a look at what happens with D&D, even if we'd rather do our thing, because we all know that D&D is the behemoth in the middle of all of us, so we must take a look at that. I think it's an interesting thing to explore, because the approach to race and to how the discourse has evolved over the last few years is something that we did touch upon in They Came from the Cyclops Escape.
Yeah.
Because being based on fantasy movies from like the 30s to the late 90s, you actually have to face against the less savory aspects of those years and those explorations. So on one hand, I think we did really well in that book, because we were aware that some things were to be expected. So we have our version of orcs, We are our goblins, we are our snake people, but we were also aware of the plenty of negative association that were those had in the past and also carried in the future. So we try to approach the characters you can have from a different aspect. So we have our archetypes in that game, which range from the champion, which is your Conan or your Perseus in there. But the look and the, let's say, race those characters can have, even with the archetypes, which is called the Inhuman. The Inhuman, the fact is that is focused more on the proudness of being different. Like, I'd often use an example that Gimli would fit into the Inhuman archetype because it's very much of, I'm a dwarf, I do dwarf things, I'm proud of that. But you can have an orc being a sage, which is our sort of wizard archetype. So from the player character's point of view, we did that, and I think you intercross the idea of player races with, no, it's not about player races, it's about what these characters are. You cut that in the middle in a different, and I think fresh way. And we put that effort as well in the antagonists, because we could have just called it a day and say, okay, you have your evil horde of orcs and your sort of stuff that it's to be expected from the movies we base this game upon. But we also take a look and we experience and we approve things that are happening as the trope of the evil horde changes. We have examples in recent shows that you can have evil conquering horde where people inside of them, lieutenants, have complex lives and are individuals in there that can be redeemed, cannot be redeemed.
Yeah.
It depends on them and you interact with them. So even our entries about orcs make clear that there's this orc population that half can be heroes, can be villains. But some people that are concentrated on a cultural shift that makes them often hostile against the others. And the serpent people, we get into some really old and bad stereotypes there, so we twisted things around and we say that there's a minority of serpent people that actually consider that the races that came after them are to blame for their decline when their decline just happened because they are so old, as often serpent people are in pulp books or stuff. So they, rather than having them as the secret evil cult that's hidden beneath it all, it speaks into some of more real and I'd say less problematic sort of villains. So we try to put a spin onto everything because we are aware and we live in a world that's moving forward, and I think D&D might have more problems to deal with that because there are capstones in their identity that they might have. We did that thing without even thinking twice. We were really proud about what we did with Cypress Escape. I think D&D might be their process to become the future of D&D might require more time, and as things shift into places and the identity of D&D itself decides where it wants to be in relation to some old parts of itself.
And ultimately the problem is that there is an established idea of what that is, and with a new property like Cyclops' Cave, you're not battling against that, you're creating something new. So I have some sympathy with them attempting to balance. We don't want to move away from what makes this D&D but we do want to basically evolve the system into something different. So with it, and as you said earlier, with it being playtest material, I think they'll probably be looking at this and what's coming back and making tweaks to that.
Sure.
I know I've seen some products on GM's Guild where we're talking about breaking away from racial and talking about different ancestries, because with D&D, like one of the first things you do is you pick your race. Based off the modifiers it gives to whatever your class is, so that means that certain species or races are more predispositioned for certain things and fall into the
Biosensibility.
The biosensibilities, and then the not owl drow with our dear good drow.
Drizzt's been fighting that good fight for a long time.
30 years.
Yeah. But that was one of the things working on Cyclops' cave and stuff like that, is like, let's not attach it. Anybody can be a champion, like, or anybody can be a sage. The inhuman and the puppet is more of like the what's controlling them. Like when with the intro fiction, with the example archetypes for the inhuman, I used a gorilla, but he could very easily be a dreamer. He could also very easily be a sage or a champion, because the backstory I cooked up for him was that he's a diplomat. Like his cousin his uncle sent him there to the human kingdoms to negotiate to be a diplomat, and he's been stuck there for months. And it's like, it was supposed to be 2 weeks, it's now been 3 months, and it's like, oh, only a little bit longer. And it's just really frustrated with the situation. So he's only fighting monsters. It is an attempt to get sent back home, but it's not working.
Yeah, it was actually a really important point as I wrote the art notes for Cyclops' Cave. I wanted to give an example in the various archetypes of one of them. Some are human, like the champion is a human knight, but I wanted to give a human version of another archetype. So you will find a satyr for the dreamer archetype, even if it's so to make clear that yes, you have a gorgon as an archetype splat for the human, but there's nothing stopping you. And we also say that I think you wrote that in the inhuman archetypes, inhuman can be people of various cultures can be into any archetype, but there's no mechanical support that forces you to pick something in that sense.
Speaking personally about one D&D or D&D in general, there's lots of D&D archetypes I like. I don't necessarily think they should go unchallenged, but I think alignment is a good thing. I honestly think it's a good thing because I think it provides a guideline for new role players as to how to play. Now, should it be a straitjacket, and if you are playing lawful good paladin, you've got to play it 2nd edition style, where if you as much as step on a bug, you lose your paladin abilities? No, that's it's reductive. Yeah. It's people are going to enjoy that. Some people will, but not for me as a game designer or a fan. But I think having tools in a game that tell you this is a good way to play your character is part of the reason why D&D is so successful, because it's archetypal. Yes, it's stereotypical, but if I'm a new role player, I need those familiar building blocks. And how they change that, and this is what's going to be interesting with D&D over time, because D&D they experimented in a wild way with 4th edition, as everyone knows, and it's de rigueur to say, 4th edition. But 4th edition did some very interesting things. Some of them they did very well. And the main block they came up against was established D&D players who didn't want to change that. It appealed to new players. They still outsold, every other role-playing game on the market. So, minus Pathfinder very briefly. When it comes to things like racial modifiers and a character being defined by his race, I have no issue with the idea that, orcs may have a culture that is destructive or warlike, but they are not biologically directed to be destructive and warlike. It's a cultural thing. If D&D can make that distinction, if they can say in their setting material, they are like this because their lords, their gods, whatever, tell them to be like this. You have the freedom as players to break off, as players always have done. Again, Drizzit is something of a joke, but it's very appealing. The reason he is still going as a protagonist of novels 30 years later is because people like characters that break the mold. So there's nothing wrong with having a culture that does things that Waterdeep might consider evil, but it should be more than just a biological need to go around burning down villages, taking slaves, and consorting with dark deities. That's just simplistic. Can be fun. I'm not denying that. There's a lot of OSR fans, and I don't say that in a derisory way, because I think OSR has a fantastic, thriving market who want games that harken back to very simple tentpoles in a lot of ways. And that's great. But when you're moving a game forward, OSR has its name for a reason. OSR plays old school games, and they want to play them that way. But new editions need to progress in some way. So hopefully one D&D will do that. And you know, I want Wizard of the Coast to do well. I want Hasbro to do well. I want the new edition of D&D to outsell 5th edition. But yeah, they need to be smart about it and not just not ignore responses, but not just respond to responses that are the most screamed, I guess. It's just a case of analysis and working out what's sensible.
Thank you very much. That's a good question. A lot of discussion there. Unfortunately, that is the last question we can afford to take. That has brought us to time. So I'd just like to say thank you to all the panelists. We have a round of applause for them, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And if you do want to listen back to that, we will have a recording up on the Unlucky Frog podcast if you want to listen back to what was said today. But thanks for coming, and enjoy the rest of your convention, folks. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.